exposing the propaganda and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. This is your host, Tim Tapp, coming to you live from historic Roane County, Tennessee. Got a lot of things to cover, so let's jump right into it. First of all, on the offbeat tonight, in case you haven't heard, the town of Dorset, Minnesota, has a very unique mayor. He's a 4-year-old. You might think that your toddler rules the roost, but in Dorset, one actually does. 4-year-old Robert Tufts, who goes by Bobby, was elected mayor of the small town, which has a population of 22. So how in the world does Tufts become one of the youngest politicians ever? Well, as it turns out, his name was drawn out of a hat. Each year, the community near Park Rapids has a drawing during their 2012 Taste of Dorset Festival, and for a $1 entry fee, a lucky individual can become mayor for a year, regardless of age. In fact, you don't even have to live there. According to the New York Daily News, a 5-year-old from Chicago was once running the century-old town, which has no official zip code. While most of Dorset's decisions are made by local businesses, that doesn't mean that Tufts, who's reportedly a singer, dancer, and expert fisherman, is not taking his job seriously. The toddler, whose family has lived in Dorset for four generations, doles out expert advice from bait and even helps citizens cross the street. At any rate, I thought that was worth talking about, as you just don't hear about something like a 4-year-old mayor every day, and it certainly qualifies as in the offbeat. Also, in the realm of new technology, a man that was dead for 40 minutes was brought back to life with a new CPR technique. An Australian man who was clinically dead for a full 40 minutes was brought back to life thanks to a relatively new cardiopulmonary resuscitation procedure. Colin Fiddler, a 39-year-old from Danganore in Victoria, was pronounced dead at the Alfred Hospital last June after suffering a heart attack, according to the Australian news outlet Herald Sun. Doctors were able to revive him with the use of a mechanical CPR machine called the Autopulse, along with a portable heart-lung machine to keep the blood and oxygen flowing to his vital organs. Fiddler is one of 7 cardiac arrest patients in Australia treated with the technique, and one of these 3 was revived after being declared dead for 40 to 60 minutes. The Autopulse is a non-invasive cardiac support pump that moves more blood through the body than manual compressions, according to the manufacturer, Zoll. It minimizes no-flow time and squeezes the entire chest as opposed to single-spot CPR. The Autopulse was first commercialized in 2003. Emergency medical technicians have been discussing the usefulness of the CPR device for years. Certainly an interesting new technology, as it's becoming more mainstream, and we're looking to see it in the United States very soon. At any rate, as it turns out, we do have a not only verdict, but also a punishment set aside for Dr. Kermit Gosnell. Gosnell waived his right to an appeal in exchange for a sentence of life without parole. Gosnell was convicted this past Monday of first-degree murder in the case that became a flashpoint in the nation's abortion debate. Former clinic employees testified that Gosnell routinely performed illegal abortions past Pennsylvania's 24-week limit, that he discovered issues with late-term pregnancies and recommended the abortions, that he delivered babies who were still moving, whimpering, or breathing, and that he and his assistants dispatched the newborns by snipping their spines, as he referred to it. Prosecutors had been seeking the death penalty because Gosnell had killed more than one person, and his victims were especially vulnerable given their age. But Gosnell's own advanced age had made it unlikely he would ever be executed before his appeals ran out. Gosnell's lawyer, Jack McMahon, said that his client accepts the verdict and isn't sorry he went to trial. He said Gosnell gave up a somewhat better deal early on, but wanted to air the issues in court, and is satisfied that he did so. He wanted this case aired out in the courtroom, and it got aired out in the courtroom in a fair way. And now he's accepting what will happen. He's an intelligent guy. That was a quote from McMahon, his lawyer, who also said that Gosnell would now plead to federal drug charges that are still pending. The sentencing deal reached after hours spares Gosnell's family the task of pleading for his life in court. Gosnell has 6 children. The youngest of them is still a teenager, born to his third wife, who's also pled guilty in the case. Now, along with a lot of other not-so-nice details, the bottom line here is this is a man who committed atrocious crimes, and unlike what the folks on the left, especially the militant feminists, would like for you to believe, the way he operated his clinic is the rule as opposed to the exception. There are far more atrocities going on in these so-called abortion-on-demand clinics. This is not unusual. But I have to also say that my stomach was turned by seeing how so many people on the right just started celebrating the fact that he was found guilty. Not that I wasn't pleased to see justice done to a degree, but ultimately, this is not something to be happy about. These atrocities have not been stopped. This individual has been stopped, but this is still going on in 1,000 other clinics across the country every single day, more times than we can count. There's nothing about this that's worth being happy. One battle fought, one battle won, war far from over. Abortion on demand is an atrocious industry, and it must be ended. It isn't about choice, it's about life. It isn't about a person's right to choose. That person had the right to choose a million other ways to prevent becoming pregnant in the first place, not the least of which was trying not to have sex in the first place. If you're not in a position that you can live with the consequences, then you shouldn't be engaged in the activities. It's not just from a moral standpoint, but it's also from an economic standpoint. It's from a common sense standpoint. And unfortunately, for the folks on the left, what passes as common sense is far from it. And actual common sense, actual using your brain in a reasonable fashion, tends to hurt. So they don't bother. After all, isn't the motto of the left since at least the tree-hugging hippie days at Woodstock, if it feels good, do it? So naturally, if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. It hurts to think. Don't do that. It's unacceptable, and we've got to make sure that more people are better educated about how these things happen, so they'll know how to prevent it in the future. Also in the news, Nancy Pelosi is now claiming that Obamacare will be largely responsible for bringing down the deficit. Obviously, things work a little differently on Planet Pelosi. Of course, the fanatic of San Francisco values. I guess we shouldn't expect much more from her. The multi-trillion-dollar government program Obamacare is not even implemented yet, and Democrats are making claims about the wonderific cure-all that even a traveling snake oil salesman would find ludicrous. Former and hopefully never to return Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, dogpiled on the laughable claims about an Obamacare program that is already 3 times original cost estimates. She was quoted as saying that many of the initiatives that he passed are what are coming to bear now, including the Affordable Care Act. Now, Pelosi was saying this in an interview with MSNBC's Chris Hayes. The Affordable Care Act is bringing the cost of health care in our country down in both the public and private sectors, and that's what is largely responsible for the deficit coming down. As the Hills points out, the only reason any deficit reduction claim from Obamacare could ever be claimed is because it taxes the bejesus out of people and companies in order to raise funds. In other words, the government is supposedly making deficit cuts by piling on taxes. Unable to comprehend this Washington doublespeak? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. It's impossible to get into just how absurd Nancy Pelosi's claim is in a short space. But a recent headline story from the Washington Examiner will suffice. The headline there was, "Insurers predict 100 to 400% Obamacare rate explosion." The internal cost estimates from 17 of the nation's largest insurance companies indicates that health insurance premiums will grow an average of 100% under Obamacare, and that some will soar more than 400%, crushing the administration's goal of affordability. New regulations, policies, taxes, fees, and mandates are the reason for the unexpected rate shock. According to the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which released a report this past Monday, based on the internal documents provided by the insurance companies, the 17 companies included Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Kaiser Foundation, along with several others, of course. When it's all said and done, a productive segment of the U.S. economy will be turned into a U.S. post office with surgical equipment. The president claimed back when selling the soap about Obamacare that the U.S. would go bankrupt if the medical system wasn't reformed. When's the last time the government was able to provide any service cheaper, more efficiently, and with more attention to customer satisfaction than the private sector? Never. It's never happened, and it never will. But just the other day, Nurse Nancy claimed that Obamacare would create more jobs for writers and cameramen, while Representative Janice Hahn from Unhinged, California, said that the monstrous medical entitlement would lead to better marriages. If anybody believes the Democrats on economic policy at this point, there's really no helping them. I mean, there is absolutely no question whatsoever. Obamacare was never designed to, quote, be affordable care. It was designed to force you into a single-payer system. It's a stepping stone. That's all it was for. And if you have any questions or any doubts about it at this point in time, then you're just not paying attention. I know that a lot of you wanted to believe the nice, happy, smiley people from the government, wanted to drink the socialist Kool-Aid and jump on board with free medicine for everybody. Why not? They're handing out cell phones. Why can't they give you your Viagra pill for free? Well, the reason why is nothing is free. Somebody has to pay for it. And from conversations I've been having, I've actually been asked off air to do a more in-depth conversation about Obamacare. Now, I've been talking about Obamacare for about as long as it's been in existence, on the radio, through the blog posts, and in articles, and wherever anybody will give me 2 seconds to talk about it. So Obamacare is not a new topic for me, but what is really happening is the reality for a lot of low-income people is really starting to set in as they face, as we are nearly 6 months into this year, meaning that we're almost 6 months out from next year, when every single citizen has to, by law, have insurance. That's why the spike's coming. Because not only do they have to have insurance, but the insurance companies don't get to pick and choose. The only thing that they get to decide is how much they're going to charge you. Now, rule number 1, not that it was legal or constitutional to do, not that it was legal or constitutional for Obamacare to have the mandate in the first place. It's certainly not a tax. Again, if you're a long-time listener to the show, you know I've said that a multitude of times. The Supreme Court got this one wrong. But regardless, if they really wanted affordability, they would have either said, number 1, they're not going to mandate insurance companies to the level of coverages available, or number 2, they would mandate to insurance companies what a maximum amount they could charge you based on your income. They didn't do either. Why? Because it's not about saving you money. It's about pushing you into something and making you think it was still your choice. The insurance companies are not bad and evil in this either. Most insurance companies are corporations. Now, if you're a fan of the left, you've been led to believe that that's evil all by itself. That means, oh, they are evil. No. They're incorporated for legal purposes. It protects them from certain situations legally. An individual running the company is protected from various lawsuits. There are tax advantages as well, but the bottom line is most corporations then have stock options. Once they issue stock, they then have a fiduciary responsibility. Now, for those of you who don't understand the word fiduciary, all that means is, in the simplest layman terms, and it's not an exact definition, but it's one that you should be able to understand if you don't know the jargon. It means they have to do everything they can within reason and legally to protect the interest of the stockholders. They have to try to make a profit. So if they're now being told they have to provide everybody the exact same coverage across the board, and they do under Obamacare, I myself have to have coverage available for me for a pregnancy. I'm never going to be pregnant. Even if they do master the technology that allows men to become pregnant, I promise you I'm not signing up for that one. I don't need that coverage. But in January of this year, if Obamacare isn't repealed, I'll have that coverage nonetheless. Along with every type of mental policy available, every type of cancer policy, every type of long-term policy, cancer, all of that is required to be part of what is offered for each and every one of you. But to my point about the low-income people, what are you going to do when you have to buy this stuff? Well, you're forced to do one of two things. This is why the IRS, and we'll get to them in a minute, was supposed to be enforcing Obamacare. Because they're going to fine you. They know most of you aren't going to be able to afford it. This is a new revenue stream, and in the meanwhile, they get more control. but they want to push you to the state exchanges because that'll be cheaper. And that's just step one towards getting a single-payer system. They're trying to socialize medicine. That's all it was ever for. All right. Before we get to the main topic of the day, which of course is, in case you didn't check the title, Scandal times 3. Well, let's take a quick commercial break, and we will be right back.
Tap into the truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog posts and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth right here on Spreaker Radio.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Tap Into the Truth on Spreaker Radio right here, right now. Don't forget to go ahead and follow the show. And while you're at it, check out the website, tapintothetruth.com. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. And we have some exciting announcements coming up soon, so you might want to keep an eye on us. And like I said, also check us out on Blog Talk Radio. We're free Sunday at 3 until 5. We're on with interesting guests some of the time. The rest of the time, count on some callers. Like I said, we've got some interesting things coming up, so it'll be worthwhile. Well, let's go ahead and get back into it. I believe I played this soundbite already, but we'll go ahead and talk about it, because what is Scandal times 3? It is the perfect storm of scandals, if you will. And what's drastically sad is, unfortunately, the left is still trying to completely ignore Benghazi. Why? Because Benghazi is something that actually can bring the entirety of this administration to its knees. This is right up there with full-blown treason. There was gun running going on. This is known. It's still ignored mostly by the media, but you know what? In case you haven't noticed, the media is swiftly deciding that things need to change, because now they're experiencing that awkward moment when they realize that the man they've tried so hard to protect because they thought he was their messiah is actually treating them like they're the enemy too. That's right. Scandal number 3, the newest one. The Justice Department was spying on reporters with the AP, and I promise you, ladies and gentlemen, I can double dog guarantee to you right now, just because the AP's the ones they've got proof that they've done it to at this point, they're not the only ones. There was absolutely no way that they were only following reports with just the AP. But despite that, that's all there's evidence of at the moment, with lots of things still coming down the pike. And what is scandal number 2? Well, of course, that was from last week, and we've already talked about that a little bit too. The IRS apologizing for targeting conservative groups. Well, as it turns out, it went even deeper than just what was initially reported. They were also targeting Jewish groups. Once again, attacking people based on their ideology about statehood of Israel. Now, if in the past you were one of the people who might have thought, hey, there could be something to this Barack Hussein Obama being a Muslim thing, and then was shamed into saying, well, okay, probably not, blah, blah, blah. Everyone seems to think differently. I don't know too many Christians that would be all that upset about the Jewish state. There's also plenty of rumors floating around that the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia was told by Obama himself that he's a Muslim. Now, that's, of course, unsubstantiated, so take it for what it's worth, which right now is not much. But one thing after another, you just can't help but start to see a little picture, see a little pattern. Anyway, this first clip is what we can expect, at least before the AP report came out. So let me tell you something, Mr. Occupier. The only ally that you have had at this point that has helped to keep your image whitewashed in the eyes of the few Kool-Aid drinkers that remained in this country is the mainstream press. You may have actually went and stepped in it just a little too far this time. But we'll see. In the meanwhile, certain members, at least at MSNBC, doing their job of protection. This is, again, Princess Nancy from Planet Pelosi on MSNBC complaining about too much time being taken up by the Benghazi scandal.
About it because it's part of what feels to me it takes away that optimism. It sort of chips it away from me. This week, we're back to Benghazi. We're back to this anxiety now about tell us who changed the talking points. I want to take a quick listen to how the White House responded to the revival of Benghazi.
Jay, you told us that the only changes that were made were stylistic. Is it a stylistic change to take out all references to previous terror threats in Benghazi?
Well, I appreciate the question again, and I think that what I was referring to was the talking points that the CIA drafted and sent around, to which one change was made. And I accept that stylistic may not precisely describe a change of one word to another.
Jay, this was not a change of one word to another. No, because Jay, these underwent extensive changes after they were written by the CIA.
Sure. There was an interagency process, which is always the case, because a lot of agencies have a stake in a matter like this.
So is there a transparency issue here, or is this political wrangling?
Well, Senator Corker, he himself, a Republican senator, said he was satisfied with the responses from the White House. The obsession that some of my Republican colleagues have in the House doesn't look like it's on the path to really finding a solution, but just to keeping an issue alive. Mm-hmm. We have to find out everything about what happened there. There's no question about that. To wrangle about some wording, when that it is the intelligence consensus estimate process. Mm-hmm.
All right, so it's the intelligence consensus process Princess Pelosi's talking about. And, of course, you heard our favorite lean forward host doing her part to try and help protect the storyline. But there was breaking news just today, wasn't there? In case you're under a rock and didn't hear it, the White House released Benghazi emails today. The White House released the full set of emails surrounding the Obama administration's development of talking points describing the September 11, 2012 terrorist attack in Benghazi. In response to continuing charges from the mean Republicans in Congress that there was a massive political cover-up of what transpired. In a briefing with reporters at the White House on today's wonderful afternoon, senior administration officials used the emails to show that the CIA, rather than the State Department, drove many of the changes to the talking points that were ultimately used by UN Ambassador Susan Rice. Which, oh, by the way, in case you haven't heard this part of the story too, evidently Susan Rice is next in line to be senior foreign policy advisor. That's right. The lady who went out and lied to America on behalf of the administration for a couple of weeks is going to be promoted. According to certain tweets from certain inside folks, it's only a matter of time. Yes, it will happen. At any rate, Republican lawmakers have argued that the State Department was attempting to alter the talking points for political reasons. In particular, they have pointed to the fact that references to Al-Qaeda and previous security warnings were removed. But senior administration officials stressed today that such language was taken out at the request of the CIA. Anyone else want to call BS on that? Because, that's basically what's happening there. Also today, we had Eric Holder. Yeah, he's the top lawman in the country. Our Attorney General was testifying in Congress. Got into it a little bit with head of the committee that he was testifying in front of, Mr. Issa. Let's take a listen.
My ranking member joined in a letter requesting that we have the full contents pursuant to our subpoena of all 1,200. Will you make them available to the committee based on our bipartisan request?
I will certainly look at the request. It's not something that I've personally been involved in, but I'll look at the request and try to be as responsive as we can. I'm sure there must have been a good reason why only the to and from parts were permitted.
Yes, you didn't want us to see the details. Mr. Attorney General, knowing the to and from,
we do.
Knowing the to and
I'm not going to stop talking now. Characterize something as something.
Mr. Chairman, would you inform the witness as to the rules of the committee?
Appropriate, and it's too consistent with the way in which you conduct yourself as a member of Congress. It's unacceptable and it's shameful.
The gentleman has the time, and the gentleman may ask the questions that he deems appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So, did you catch that? Somebody had the stones to stand up to Eric Holder, and what does the Attorney General do? He tries to attack his character. He says, no, I'm not going to stop talking, even though he's a witness testifying in front of the committee. He doesn't seem to understand the rules and has to have it explained to him. More typical left-wing mentality. When you can't stand on facts, what do? You go on the attack. Attack, attack, attack. But, that's not all Mr. Holder had to say today. In fact, here's the real gem of the day. I have to tell you, what did Eric Holder's big thing was? Well, it's the same thing that Obama's been doing while the scandal times 3 has been floating around. It's not me. It's not my fault. Take a listen.
Reported that the Associated Press refrained from releasing this story for a week until the department confirmed that doing so would not jeopardize national security interests. That indicates that the AP was amenable to working with you on this matter. If that is the case, why was it necessary to subpoena the telephone records? Did you seek the AP's assistance in the first place? And if not, why not?
Again, Mr. Chairman, I don't know what happened there with the interaction between the AP and the Justice Department. I was recused from the case.
I take it that you or others in the Justice Department will be forthcoming with those answers to those questions as you explore why this was handled, what appears to be contrary to the law and standard procedure.
Well, again, there are exceptions to some of the rules that you pointed out, and I have faith in the people who actually were responsible for this case, that they were aware of the rules and that they followed them. But I don't have a factual basis to answer the questions that you have asked because I was recused. I don't know what has happened in this matter.
Okay, so what are we talking about here? Well, in case you weren't aware, Holder was actually testifying today in regards to what was going on with the apparently illegal investigation and spying on certain AP reporters. Yes, the scandal times 3. Also, while we're discussing said scandal, from the other day, making an appearance on MSNBC's Morning Joe, And this is how you know that things are getting bad in the media for the occupier. Even MSNBC at certain levels has started to turn on him. This Carl Bernstein, infamous Watergate reporter, this is what he had to say on Morning Joe.
It is totally inexcusable that this administration has been terrible on this subject from the beginning. The object of it is to intimidate people who talk to reporters. This was an accident waiting to become a nuclear event, and now it's happened. There's no excuse for it whatsoever. There's no reason for this investigation, especially on this scale. Is there statutory authority for it? Yes, probably. Is there justification for it in terms of recognizing what the right to a free press is and what a free press means in this country? This is intimidation. It's wrong. The President of the United States should have long ago put a stop to this in his presidency.
And as the Times reported today, Carl, this administration has done this twice as often as all other previous administrations combined.
The numerical thing doesn't matter. What matters is this is a matter of policy. It is known to the President of the United States that this is the policy. To say that there was no knowledge, in quotes, specifically about this in the White House is nonsense. This is a policy matter, and this does go to the President, to the people around him, to the national security.
You use the word intimidation. It's not just about intimidating reporters, but more importantly, as you know better than anybody, it's about intimidating sources inside the government.
Yes, the idea is to try and make an example of those people who talk to reporters, especially on national security matters. National security is always the false claim of administrations trying to hide things that people ought to know. As Kathleen Carroll was saying here, the news organizations have become very good at working with administrations in terms of real national security matters. This is inexcusable. It is intimidating. There is no reason that a presidency that is interested in a truly free press and its functioning should permit this to happen.
All right. So now you have some of the biggest names in the current media, mainstream press, showing their extreme level of displeasure, and rightfully so. They have been spying on the reporters. The helpers have been treated just like the commoners, and now they find out that they're not as special as they thought they were. Also breaking today, the IRS scandal has forced the acting director of tax agency to resign. The Occupier announced today that Stephen Miller, the acting director of the Internal Revenue Service, has resigned amid criticism over the tax agency's handling of conservative groups seeking tax-exempt status. Speaking from the White House East Room, the Occupier said that he had instructed Treasury Secretary Jack Lew to hold the IRS accountable for its missteps, revealing in a Treasury Department Inspector General report released Tuesday. Among the steps Lew took was to request and accept the resignation of the acting commissioner of the IRS. It's important to institute new leadership that can help restore confidence going forward, Obama said. You know what? You got that right, Barry. It's important to institute new leadership, starting in your office and working its way down. The rest of the story you can find online. It's easy enough. You can find the reports at the Huffington Post and at CNN and at NBC and even the National Review. The bottom line is there should be jail time dealt out. There is no way on earth that two guys working in Cincinnati could have been responsible for 2.5 years of harassment against conservative and Jewish groups. the IRS bit could be the one thing that really could get Congress moving towards impeachment, especially if all they're going to do is discipline people and ask for resignations. Benghazi continues to gain strength, and we've got to keep the pressure on. American citizens died just to cover up gun running. Gun running? That mean anything to you, Mr. Holder? Fast and Furious mean anything? To cover up gun running from Libya into Syria. American citizens died to cover that up. And a further cover-up of the cover-up was required in order to get through the election cycle. This is treasonous acts. Hillary Clinton will not be unscathed, and Barack Obama should not be either. The IRS bit, there was no way that this wasn't believed to be okay. These folks thought it was acceptable behavior. These folks were targeting people because they were told to. And there should be more than just firings involved here, which so far all they've really talked about is one resignation and then disciplining a couple of people. We know there's more to it than that. The American people are not going to step back and accept it. And then the Justice Department spying on the AP reporters. This is going to be the one thing that turns the mainstream media against you, Mr. Occupier. You have bitten off a little more than you can chew. We are not living in an Orwellian novel as of yet. You've tried and pushed very hard to get us to that point. But in the end, we are American citizens, and in the end, we fight for liberty. We know freedom is hard. You've tried to brainwash generations of us into believing that we can have it easy, that the taxpayers will take care of us. Well, time's up, Mr. Occupier. The lie is over, the bubble has burst, and the rose is off the bloom. The media will not continue to cover for you now that they know that they're on the same enemies list that they believe the general public was on. You know, those of us who are just plain dumb hillbilly folks and too stupid to know what you're doing. Those of us who just aren't smart enough to think for ourselves that you need to take care of us. Well, the elite media thought you were doing the right thing. But now they've begun to realize that you don't see them as equals. That they're on the list too. Scandal times 3. And you're running out of allies. The time has come. The American public has to continue to demand answers. They have to continue to demand truth. And it's time to finally demand some real change. Ladies and gentlemen, that is tonight's show. Remember, don't take my word for it. Definitely don't take their word for it. Take a little time, do some research on your own, use your brain. That's what you have it for. We'll be back again soon, and don't forget to check out the website. Don't forget to check us out on Blog Talk. And remember, follow the show. Like I said, got some big announcements coming, and people who are following the show will have some surprises. Good night, everybody.